And we do want to continue to discuss our top story today. For that, we're going to bring in Erin O'Toole for a reaction. He is the former leader of the Conservative Party. Welcome. Thank you for joining us here in studio. It's nice to have you.
Good to be in studio again.
Okay, certainly, though, it is a busy day on the trade front. First, I actually just want to start with your initial reaction when we saw that announcement yesterday that, in fact, the tariffs against Canada for non-CUSMA compliant goods would move up to 35%.
Well, I was disappointed, but it's also a sign that we're in the final stages of a negotiation. And the president is trying to rattle his sword and have us maybe cave more or rush a deal. And I agree with Premier Ford's comments exactly. We don't cave, we don't just take whatever deal because there's more threats. President Trump, as I said when I was talking with you a few weeks ago, is under pressures as well. The IEEPA, the emergency tariffs, had a court appeal yesterday, and the 13-panel court was quite critical of the president's overreach. Congress controls trade, and they have to delegate it to the president, and they haven't here. So some of his tariffs will disappear. Some parts of our economy aren't covered by the 232 tariffs, like the steel and aluminum, because they're under the CUSMA agreement, or USMCA, whatever you want to call it. So we have to stay the course, get the best deal we can. And the president is also facing bad economy. The Dow's down 700 points this morning. We're seeing job numbers this morning that are negative. And in fact, they're readjusting previous months' job numbers down. So all of these tariffs are actually starting to hurt the American economy. So the president's in a bit of a race against time as well.
You know, you mentioned a few points that I want to pick up on. Let's start with the last one, and that is the U.S. economy. Certainly, it's something that he's watching very closely. He's suggesting, and there is some suggestion, that the U.S. economy is not hurting quite as badly as some had initially anticipated it would be with these tariffs. So will that sort of impact in a negative way when we're talking about the Canadian side?
Well, the U.S. economy hasn't reacted quite as much as you'd think because people saw this coming. So a lot of inventories were piled up. I know a Canadian garment producer who told me they moved almost a year's worth of product to their U.S. facility ahead of tariffs to sort of weather the storm. But the one sort of canary in the coal mine, if you might say, is the auto industry. So you're seeing they don't have the ability to have half a year's inventory of steel and other things. They're a just-in-time manufacturer. So the big three, GM and others, have been losing billions in the last few months, and there's uncertainty for new investment. So President Trump is in a race against that. Certainly our economy will hurt too. So
yes.
As we're sort of standing firm, as I think we should, and the Prime Minister and the Premiers are, we may have to help industries that are really suffering, like steel, like aluminum, because they are being used in a trade war. So we have to have their back, so to speak. I think we can do that until we get a deal. The president will be facing shortages on shelves in the U.S. because of this trade war in the Thanksgiving run up to Christmas, Halloween. That's when you're going to see prices go up, scarcity of goods. That's not a sign of a strong economy. So the president has to balance all this off. I think we can get a deal by September.
Okay, and you seem very confident in that too. The timeline where you say, you know, it's possible for Canada to reach a deal, you say September. Why are you so confident that that will be the case? Is it because of those pressures when you're talking about store shelves and the additional economic pressures? Is there anything else that the U.S. government is contending with when it comes to these that Canada can kind of rely on?
Well, inflation will hurt them, it will hurt us as well. So when there's scarcity of goods, you're going to see the costs going up. We will start seeing that soon because all of the planning of piling up inventories, you know, a lot of auto dealers, people bought cars months ago because they were worried about the impact of tariffs. So that's going to cause economic slowdown and inflation. So that's what the president is facing. Like we are smaller. This is tough. We have to hold fast. We have to stay on target, as I've said on your show before. But there's pressures on the Americans too. A lot of the emergency tariffs, the IEEPA tariffs, will likely disappear. The president's facing inflation, bad job numbers. So he needs a deal. A lot of other countries were locking in deals faster for the certainty. I think we can hold out for a strong deal. And then remind the Americans, if they want to build ships, that's a big priority for the president, for the U.S. Navy. They can use our supply chain, Canadian steel, aluminum. We need to get back to that. and I'm hoping we can drive a good deal and then normalize relations.
In terms of what we can leverage at this point, we were talking about the digital sales tax as well, which is something that was a piece of leverage, or was believed to be, and then it was something that was taken off the table when talks were ended because the U.S. president said he doesn't want to continue negotiations because of that specifically. So where does the leverage stand? It certainly feels, for many Canadians, I believe we've heard this sort of reaction that without countermeasures, are we giving a strong posture, or would that be the wrong approach?
Well, we have to be careful not to have counter tariffs or, retaliatory revenge tariffs, as some people call them, if they hurt us more. But there's actually a lot more we can do. We can start diversifying our trade routes, saying we're going to put our critical minerals to Europe and to other players, not to the U.S. We can also use competition law and national security law to say, hey, look, all the big cloud providers from the United States and AI providers from the United States, they have rules under the Cloud Act in the U.S., the Patriot Act, that Europe has trouble with. Canada could start to pivot towards Europe's approach to regulating privacy, regulating cloud and data and AI. That will hurt the digital or the intangible economy of the United States, and it's not a tariff. So there's a lot more we can do, but we have to be united. We have to be strategic, and I think now is about the time that we should start applying this pressure. And some of these competition or regulatory things we can do aren't the counter tariffs that will hurt our economy. So this is a tricky time. That's why I'm glad to see a bit of a united front. I'm glad to see Mr. Poilievre wants a deal, all the premiers. We really need to be Team Canada here. Hold fast, stay on target, as I like to say, and drive for the best deal we can get.
I know that you are short on time, but I do want to ask one more final question.
Sure.
If we know that the Canadian team is remaining in Washington, continuing those talks, if you were there right now, what would you suggest?
I'd suggest what I suggested in 2018, Arthi, is we need to do partnership in the Arctic with the Americans. So ballistic missile defense, which we proposed partnering in back in 2018. Now President Trump calls it Golden Dome. He's called it Golden, that's his brand. But it's still protecting our Arctic too, at a time that Russian aggression in Ukraine and the war in Ukraine, the trade routes in the Arctic. There's a way we could partner on defense and security in our own backyard, also partner with the U.S. on shipbuilding, get back to the traditional relationship we'd had. So I've always said in the U.S. and Washington, they talk about trade and security in the same sentence. And it's good. I've seen Minister LeBlanc do that. I've seen Prime Minister Carney do that in a way that Prime Minister Trudeau never did, Ms. Freeland never did. I think that's a way to sort of drive at a time that the U.S. is worried about the changing geopolitics. We need to be a dependable ally in the Arctic and on North American defense, NORAD. So talk trade and security, stay down there, drive for a deal, and know that Canadians are behind you to get the best deal for our country.
Okay, and we'll see if you're right about that September deal date. Thank you so much for joining us. That is Erin O'Toole. He is the former leader of the Conservative Party. Thank you again for joining us today.
Thank you.